All
How you
right.
doing?
So we should be live here at Real Fridays every Friday at 12:30. It is Real Fridays where we talk about mortgage headlines. And I don't want to say, I always struggle with the word, Brock, when I say insider information, because it's not illegal inside information, but it's information that's intimate to the business that most people, because of their lack of experience or lack of relationships, just simply don't have, that we have. So I'm Rick Rock. I represent sort of the mortgage banking channel. I'm an expert on the mortgage banking space. And of course, Brock Cassidy is our chief revenue officer from NewZip, real estate tech innovator, really phenomenal guy. Love the guy. And then Jeremy Potter is simply always our Detroit time
Yeah, I
next
spoke to
belt
him, and
guy.
as always, he's juggling
In fact,
things, and he'll join us in a minute or
in
two.
fact, we may have just zoomed forward about 20 years. We got Jeremy Potter right in the middle here, otherwise known as Jeff Walton. Jeff is the founder and is your title CEO of Ingenious, or is it president?
CEO.
Or is it just CEO?
Yeah, co-founders.
And are you any longer? Are you still? And again, this is my ignorance. I know at one time you were a board member at Total Expert. Are you still a board member at Total Expert? Is there still? Are you just friend, close advisor?
No, there's no. The only board members are Joe and the venture capitalists that back them. But I was president of Total Expert for about 6 years.
Yeah, no, that's. I actually knew
from I would guess negative revenue, probably to about 40 million in revenue.
Yeah, that's incredible. No, you had a great run at Total Expert. I'm excited to go there. They have their company conference here on November 5th.
Right.
And so super excited to do that. But Jeremy will be joining us. He's always a couple of minutes late. I think he had a prior commitment, but he's going to be joining us here any minute. But typically the first segment when we open up is really just talk about, sort of mortgage headlines. I know we were all at the MBA convention. Let's start with you, Brock. What was your couple takeaways from that were sort of new to you from the standpoint of the MBA and what you observed at the conference this year?
Yeah. Good to see both of you out there. Got to separately have a dinner with each of you, or at least near each of you. Same table, large tables. Yeah, it was fun. I was mainly out there seeing some of our investors, some of our clients. So I didn't spend a ton of time in the sessions themselves as the MBA annual normally goes. But I would say that there was a lot more new tech than I'd seen in the past few years. I feel like people always say that, but I was not saying that the last 2 or 3 years. This year, I did see some new things. So that's always nice to see. The other interesting thing is that a lot of existing companies were rolling out new products, Jeff included, the Ingenious 2.0. So I think a lot of companies have been in the lab working, layering in AI or layering in new technology stacks into their solutions. There's some really crazy examples that we've heard of, like Better Mortgage is now selling their Tin Man solution, and they had a whole booth dedicated to that. That a friend of mine that used to work for me at my last company is one of their first hires, so I got to catch up with him on that. I think there's a lot of like next generation of existing tech companies and next generation of tech type stuff that was there. So I like seeing that.
That's great. Jeff, what about yourself? How long have you been in the mortgage business, Jeff? Like how many years has it been approximately?
It's been so long I stopped counting, I'll be honest with you. So I'd say 41 years.
41 years. So you've seen so many of these conventions, right? And you've seen technology sort of come and go. Like what sort of jumped out at you as being sort of what surprised you this year in Las Vegas?
The convention center was not in the main building of the of the hotel, so it was completely running back and forth from like suites in the tower over to the convention center. I spent more time on elevators and escalators than I think I ever have at any convention in my entire life of the 41 years, right? But so, being in the business as long, I think the perspective of seeing all the different cycles, the up cycles, down cycles, and this one seems to have, extended for sure. But what I did notice was there is an air of optimism that things have kind of settled down from a rate perspective, that this is the new normal. We might get some break in rates, get a 5 handle. That would be helpful for people. For the most part, I think that the mindset of people is that this is our market. This is what we're doing. This is what we're competing in. They've cut costs. They continue to cut costs. They're continuing to look at what is the next product. AI is, of course, stated so much. People are sick of hearing about AI, to be honest with you. Not sick of hearing about it. They're sick of hearing the term, but not necessarily always seeing the results in the product, right? That's what I think they're sick of in terms of it. And I do think that it's entering, but I don't think it's massively been put out by anybody that has revolutionized any of the tech stacks out there. It's helped and stuff, but I think that's still not quite dominant per se, but a lot of talk about it. And I think we'll start to see it probably in the next year more. I think it'll be much more impactful next year because people this year are just starting to absorb it, to be honest with you. So that's kind of the takeaway I saw.
Jeff, do you think the cycle this year, this time around that we're in, really since 2023, what hallmarkers are like sort of make this cycle sort of different than I mean, there was the run up. There was, my first cycle run up was 2001 to 2000, really six and 7 as it kind of tapered out, and then we entered into sort of obviously a crash cycle in 08 and then recovery. And then there was like these micro cycles of 2013, and then there was 2018, and then there was the boom cycle of 2020, and then 2023. Like, of these cycles, what would you say to be different about this one? Because it seems like it doesn't fit this concept of like, well, this is just another cycle, and we're gonna bounce to where we were, in 2022 or 2019 or 2016. Like, what makes this one different, or do you think it's just the same?
I think it's different in a couple of different respects. I think that it's different from the standpoint of the biggest boom that you've ever seen, followed by the most rapid rise in rates that you've ever seen. And so the boom to bust happened like whiplash speed. And I think that obviously, affected everybody rather harshly. So if you're a tech company, like your total addressable market got cut in half, right? And if you were an incumbent with a lot of customers and a higher ARR, you lost more ARR than somebody starting out, such as ourselves. We were born in the pandemic, and we're just relatively new to the market as a startup, and so while we were impacted somewhat, we've grown through the entire time. But if you're sitting there with 500 customers and a large ARR, you got impacted heavily, and so I think that on the tech side is the case. And then of course what happens when you go from boom to bust and your volume is cut in half. You can't burn the furniture fast enough in mortgage. I mean, you just can't. So I think that was the speed at which it happened, and then I think secondly, the duration has been 3 years of tougher rates. Whereas you look back at 07, 08, 09. You look at 08, 09 and stuff in the Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie world. If you were not part of the securitization world, the Fannie Freddie Ginnie world continued on. It wasn't that difficult, and all the houses that got foreclosed on were inventory that came out. So there was inventory. Rates weren't outrageously high, and so this one, high rates, low inventory, production in half. It's been more dramatic and more prolonged than some previous cycles.
Jeremy, welcome, buddy.
Good to be here. Thank you. Good to see you, Jeff.
What were some takeaways, and what and how do you want to where do you want to lead this conversation on data, right? And market intelligence. It's such a fascinating subject because we've always, it seemed like there was this concept of like your dashboard back in like 2011, 12, 13, and then was the rise of Power BI and Tableau, and like this idea of like getting your arms around the data of your company, and then CoreLogic was kind of the original sort of driver of we used to get these spreadsheets. We used to get these PDF files with LOs. You remember this, Jeff, where these LOs, of everyone's production numbers back in like 2011 and 12 and 13. And they were so, they were so difficult to understand and read, and the accuracy was off. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what was your takeaways from the conference as far as something unique, something that really surprised you. And two, like, where do you see data and intelligence in this market going? Because it just, data is data, right? And so it seems difficult for me to see so many competitors in the space that it strikes me that there has to be consolidation. And with AI, it seems like this is going to be, it makes access to data that much easier. So I'd be curious as to your thoughts and what your questions are for Jeff.
Well, I think a couple things. One, I think that one of the things that may be a cycle, it may be a trend, but I definitely felt it, which was if you're not a data vendor, and I'll talk about data in a second, other technology companies, other vendor partners are really struggling as point solutions. And it's because I can't keep buying one of everything for all of these different niche capabilities or tools. What makes this an interesting insight for me, I think, is that the lesson I learned from Jeff that was tremendously valuable for Ingenius's scale and Ingenius's growth was you also can't be generic. You can't just be, hey, here's everything, like this platter of data, right? And so it is a very different strategy to talk about market data and the things you do with strategic data versus point solutions for people accomplishing a task or accomplishing part of the production cycle. And so the key insight for me that Jeff taught me was, look, data can do a lot of different things. In some ways, you could argue it can do whatever you want. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? I'll get you some data. Let's work on it. We'll get as clear a picture as we can. Ingenious went the other way and said, wait a second. We know that this is the source. We know this is what our customers need to do. We'll start with the primary thing we can help with and keep building out from recruiting. And then the next big thing I learned was, why not deliver that in as many of the tools they already use as possible? So my mind goes to Total Expert, obviously, Jeff, with your history there. But the reality is, like, and I'm also not going to wall myself off from other people. And I think those kind of tensions in the conference around how do I get into a walled garden if I'm not already in one? And two, how do I make sure that I'm not just this, just this general solution that's trying to do whatever you want? Those two things are really critical. So I hope that made sense. And Jeff, thank you as always for the things I keep learning as we work together. But those are, Rick, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Jeff, what are your thoughts on that as far as the direction of data? Did we lose? Is Jeff frozen?
That actually makes me happy, Rick, because I was afraid I didn't say something compelling enough.
I know, right? I
was like, okay, good.
Dude,
at least I'm on the right track.
Dude, this is hilarious.
That's what I'm usually looking for.
I'm going to keep him on the spot. I'm going to keep him on the spotlight,
Usually,
hoping that it'll just activate.
I'm looking for
There he is. He's back.
I've got these theories, and I'm usually looking for like, am I on the right track? That's all I need to keep going. Am I on the right track?
Go ahead, Jeff. Can you hear us? Oh, I guess he was maybe you get. Here, I'm going to remove him, and then I'll try to add him again.
I'll answer for a moment then while we wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
I definitely think you're on the right track there, Jeremy. I think Ingenious, even with the acquisition they announced, what was that, 3 or 4 months ago, where they went on stage at the TMC Tech Day and demoed that.
Simple.
That was, the platform that's specifically for recruiting. They're like, Ingenious data can power 30 different things, 300 different things, but here's an awesome one that's ready to go. Use it.
That's right.
Good go-to-market strategy. Jeff, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I got. Hopefully, I remain connected and stuff.
I had a weekend at Bernie's moment when you froze up there, Jeff. So I'm glad you're you're going.
Don't you love freezing on screen? It is the best. It's not like you're sitting there doing a picture at a conference or stuff and got the perfect smile and everything. It's you're blinking, your eyes are shut, and your mouth is open, right? So anyway, it's good to be back.
You looked good.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, do you want to re-summarize your point? Just, I'm not sure how much Jeff heard of it, but I just wanted to make sure that he got it, because I thought it was a good point on the direction of data. I'd love to hear Jeff's thoughts on that.
Yeah, Jeff, we were just asking you to kind of talk through a little bit of this idea that you have to be specialized enough to have expertise in the thing that you're trying to carve out, but you also have to deliver it through relationships and through product that people already use. And that I kind of saw you react to, like, we've seen a lot of these general buffet of data or buffet of solutions come into our industry and try to get everybody to buy everything or do whatever you want with it, versus saying, no, here's who I am and what I do.
Right. So I went off camera just because
okay. Yes.
Gotcha. Taking up the bandwidth and stuff. But so look, at any SaaS company, you've got to have focus. And we were like, in the beginning, as we were doing it, we had a multitude of different things we could go after. And so I'm a big fan of this. Pick 3, right? Pick 3 things you're going to specialize in. And then the next is in building out a company. The number one thing we talked about to begin with was make the data as accurate as possible. That was our North Star. That's your cornerstone of a company. If you're a data company and what you're providing really is the transition of raw data that is incomplete and messy into accurate data, you better have that as a company before you try and conquer anything else, right? So we felt we accomplished that. And then the next piece was, okay, now let's make it easier for the user and more modern and best for the user. So we focused on UI UX. We spent 9 months developing Genius 2.0. And so we just released that. Our complete cutover was 15th of October. So we're totally off our old system on our new system. And it's gotten really good reviews. I actually got a nice text from my buddy Joe Wellew, CEO of Total Expert, and Joe's not exactly a snowflake on reviewing products, shall I put it that way? And he said he'd been in our system. He was very, very impressed. He thought it was really well executed, and he said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but I didn't know you guys could execute so well." So, with a smiley face, but that's a big compliment in terms of that. And so, you build the cornerstone of making sure that your product has the ability to be, really, really good accuracy. Then you build the UI UX, right? And now the next phase of it is you've taken this data with a delivery system that is extremely user friendly. The next piece for us clearly is going to be layering in the the AI, right? So we produce data, and then you get this, you can get massive reports of data where it's just pages and pages of data, right? Which then, what does that do for you? Even if you lay it out from a filtered search, right? Or you're looking at a market for CRA fair lending, and you're looking at the census tracts for low to moderate or majority minority. The next piece of it is that if you have good data, then you can feed it into AI, and then you can have it analyzed, right? But if you don't have good data and you have it analyzed, you're going to get just terrible, analytics from a large language model. It has to be good data to do that, and so that's our next focus, and we feel like you can really do some cool things with it. One of the things we're looking at doing is taking the entire country and every census tract in the country for a particular institution, running it through AI and showing, because we automatically calculate, you against your peers as defined by the regulators in those census tracts. You can run a monthly report on the entire country that says, where do I have hotspots, right? And you think but because we reverse engineer the deed data, make it look like HMDA data on a month-over-month basis, every month you can update and you can catch hotspots that you have as a lender for CRA on a monthly basis across the entire country with one report that sums it up through AI. Like the value of that is tremendous for these people getting in front of it versus waiting until they get HMDA 4 months into the next year and everything's in the rearview mirror and stuff, and they're trouble in all these different markets, and this market they didn't expect it to be and they didn't know. Now monthly you can do it, and you can do it at scale, and that's the next evolution of it, and using AI. One example.
Yeah, Rick, that's a really good example also of when you have as much experience in the mortgage industry looking at lending or lending patterns and recognizing that competitive analysis, recruiting, compliance analysis and lending patterns, and fair lending as a subset of compliance are all overlapping Venn diagram of the data set. That's the other thing. It's when you're a SaaS company, a data company, and you don't have to fundamentally change the core product, and all you have to change is the UX to deliver lending patterns. I mean, Jeff just described why you can do that so efficiently too, because you have that experience. I mean, I think that's kind of, maybe it's unique, but it's really powerful either way.
Yeah, it's clarity of the market is paramount in order to manage the business that you have, and then to create a strategy to manage the business that you'll get. And the challenge is, and I still see this, and it's still shocking, with as much data that's available to people, like AI aside, with as much data that's available to leaders, most leaders are just not data driven. They always have a person in the organization that is. They always have the person that is the metrics or the data analysis, or like at Cross Country. I mean, we had a team that was just focused on, data and analytics, right? And the idea is to drive that data and analytic function in a way where you could see the organization clearly. You could see it financially. You could see the, like you were saying, Jeff, what communities you want to go into to kind of increase your Black and Latino lending sort of initiatives. Or what if you want to increase your USDA or VA initiatives, what parts of the country, and by zip codes, by streets, you can determine where you need loan officers and which realtors to go after in order to drive that part of your business. So now rather than it being resorted to a specific team of data analytic experts, if you will, now, we're sort of democratizing this and putting this in the hands of every branch manager and every loan officer in an organization. It's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly powerful. But so few people, even at the top of most mortgage companies, granted, most mortgage companies are small, are reasonably small, is that they aren't data driven. And it kind of blows my mind on how little of a grasp that leaders have on their own organization, and how little grasp they have on how to get new business, because they just aren't connected to the data on where the originations are, who's doing them, where to go after them, how to structure your organization, your comp plans, your pricing in order to get that business. It's just really, it's a very intricate, sophisticated approach to the business. And what I love about Ingenious, and this was my first impression of it in leaving cross country, where we had our arms around the data using Tableau, and we had about 11 different sources of data. And I think that's, Jeff, when you and I first started talking, because I was like, hey, I'm leaving cross country, and I really would love to use your tool in a way that I used to use and have access to data. And you were right there in enabling me to sort of get a much deeper understanding of what the market was doing. Anyways, so but aren't you shocked, Jeff, on how, in as much as you do today, even, and I do think that the release you just did is probably one of the most profound and one of the best releases, the way you integrate existing data with future data into one sort of UX experience for the user. I think it's one of the best I've seen, to be totally honest with you. But how would you say, it's just shocking to me. Like, how do you encourage? Is it an age thing of owners? Do you think it'll get easier as workers, as the younger generation becomes into positions of leadership, and they're just used to having all this data and aggregating it and managing it and having it on your fingertips? Whereas people my age and probably older are simply just not used to that. So you kind of just delegate it out. I mean,
I think it can be overwhelming, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so what has to happen, and is going to happen, is that it's going to, like you said, AI is going to make the summary of data and the analytics of it boiled down to much more simple and digestible information that you can really, and the term dumb it down is a terrible one. It's not. It's people are busy doing what they're doing, and they can't sit there and totally analyze a big sheet of data and go through it and spend that time. The percentage of people that are, capable of that or desire to is relatively small. So you're right. You always have somebody that's interpreting the data for them and telling them what it means and stuff. If you can boil it down and simplify it to where you can sit here and say, here are all the counties in the United States. Here's how you're doing in each of those counties. Here is your two competitors. This is how they're doing. But then you can put it in a large language model, right? And then you can prompt it so many different ways that you can just by typing it in, and soon by voice, you can just discover so much, because you can draw out data on an instant basis that you never could do before. Right? You had to have an interpretation of another human being that sits there and stares at it at length. Now you're going to be able to just analyze it in seconds, and it can get to exactly what you're trying to get to. You can find out what counties you're doing 75% of your business in, and you can do it on a monthly basis and trend line it so that you know exactly what everybody in your company is doing. Simplify. And so that makes the data more ubiquitous, and it makes it available all the way down to a branch manager. But yeah, I am surprised. Today you can be a wholesaler, and you can take each one of your AEs, and they can look at each one of their accounts that they manage, and they can see what market share they're getting, and they can see where every single loan is going and by what product it's going to, right? Sometimes that can be overwhelming, but AI will make that simpler. Today, it's hard for people to drill down on it, and so they don't use it enough, even though the data is even there. That's what we find. So we're going to take it to the next level, where it really, really boils it down to you and brings out the insights and makes the discoveries for you, so you don't have to do it yourself.
Yeah, it seems like the competition and the challenge is changing from, having the data to having the data customized to such a degree for that person's use case at that minute, right? Just having the data is still an accomplishment for most of us in the industry. So it's I kind of what Jeremy was saying earlier, of like your go-to-market strategy of getting the right data in exactly the right place in the CRM a recruiter's already using, for that first use case you guys worked on a couple of years back and still are crushing today, was really insightful for me too, to see like the go-to-market strategy of it. Cool, we have the data. What does that mean? Let's make recruiters make this amount extra money per month or whatever it is now. And now you have, I don't know how many different use cases you guys have like that, hundreds at this point probably, at different levels. So maybe thousands, I don't know. So that'll be cool to see the AI prompting, make that even easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Jeff.
Excited.
Jeff, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, we keep talking about the data, and you mentioned, hey, our job is to get this and make it useful and make it usable in a way that matters and isn't a mess. We just saw a little bit on the credit side how access to the data is now, I won't call it disrupted, but certainly how credit vendors get their data is changing. We'll leave it at that. But for you, what's the risk, or is there a risk of access to the data you need to do what you're doing for the customers? Is that changing as well? Is it as dynamic a landscape? Is there anything that you worry about getting access to the data you need to be valuable?
No, I don't think so. I mean, all data, the deed data is one of the cornerstones of what we use, among other things, right? MLS data, NMLS data, census data, HMDA data. So they're all pretty reliable sources, because you have to record, every deed of trust and note in the nation. And the idea that it's done in different counties, and it's done at different speeds, and it's done using different technology or no technology at all. Really what we're doing is arbitraging that mess, right? And making it much more accurate. The idea that they're going to all of a sudden do a tremendously better job at the county level, I just don't see it, right? And so there's always going to be aggregators of that data. It's going to be messy. Could they get better at it? Maybe. That just means our data will be better. But we make over 40,000 corrections every single month to data, or more. And you have to be able to make it more accurate. And if you don't make it more accurate, and it's not accurate at the loan level, then when you match and append data on individual mortgage consumers, if you don't make that accurate, then your match and append won't be accurate, and you can't rebuild your databases. And if you can't rebuild your databases well, you're not going to retain your customers. And the ones that do that well will maintain their customers and will do better in the marketplace against the servicers that are rising up to do a better job. It's an arms race, between them and the servicers in terms of retaining those people. And, data is going to be key to that. Data is absolutely key to that.
How do you think it reshapes the industry, Jeff? Look, it used to be, I could be a small mortgage company in Burlington, Vermont, and I could be this great small, like my father had a mortgage company and a real estate agency, and we were sort of king of the world, right? In the 80s, right? In this small little enclave, because your connection to the outside world was really small, right? So all you really knew was really what was immediately around you, your neighbors, the communities around you. And it just seems as now no longer can you be this small regional player, because it used to be like I was safe. My relationships to my neighbors, my relationships to my realtors, my relationships with builders, I knew who they were. My data was my relationships, right? I knew who they were, and I could get the business as a result. And I had that advantage over a small company called American Pacific that started in Sacramento, California, because they didn't know my market, right? They didn't know my realtors, the people who are listing their homes. They didn't know the local loan officers. They didn't know the builders. Like relationships drove the data, right? And then data, because so now all of a sudden your tool comes around, and with the evolution of making it more simple and putting it in the hands of the users, all of a sudden data becomes the relationship, You can establish firm relationships because of the data. And whether you're in Sacramento, California, or Manhattan Beach, or in Burlington, Vermont, or in Presque Isle, Maine, it's like all of a sudden the advantage of knowing your neighbor is not as much of an advantage anymore, because I can, through the data, I can know them just as well as you can. The more that data becomes more available, more accessible, more clear to make decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I think relationships are still very, very important. I don't think there's any question about it. So relationships are important stuff. What we're trying to do is make it a transparent market, right? We believe that if you make it transparent about what a loan officer does and what a lender does, and what a realtor does, what a title company does, if you make all of that transparent, you're going to be more efficient as an entire organization. No longer do you hire somebody that you don't know what they really produce, right? No longer do you go to work for somebody that doesn't match the strengths of what you need as a company. You can see their data. You can see what their axe is. You know where they are good and where they're not in their loan production volume. You can see markets and where they're good and where they're not. You can see all that stuff, and you're going to make a better informed decision. So you're going to make it a better fit for yourself at a company, and a company's going to make a decision that's a better fit for that LO with them. Easier to recruit and easier to retain. And then beyond that is the relationship with the customer, which I think is what you're focused on. And certainly existing customers that are out there that you're not getting from a referral source, such as a realtor, builder, or financial advisor, you now have access to those people as well. All right. And so you have access to your database. When you leave a company, you don't want to get sued. You want to be able to rebuild your database, have it even more accurate and more updated so that you can retain those clients. And I can tell you from experience of selling data, the top 10% LOs in this country, they got their database. Their data house is in order. That's why they're in the top 10%. They're not in the top 10% just because they have good relationships. They're in the top 10% because they have control of their customers and they've built something over time. And that's a lesson for all loan officers in the business and companies in the business. You want to retain your customer. It's cheaper to retain than it is to develop a new customer.
It isn't
great.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, Jeremy, it's such an interesting from a legal perspective of like who owns the data, because I agree with you. The second that a mortgage company pulls credit on a consumer, technically that mortgage company owns that consumer. But the reality is, I don't know, man. It's like if I can go to an organization and say, hey, I'm at Potter Mortgage. I've been in the business 10 years, and Potter Mortgage has a tool that can organize all the addresses, first name, last name, email addresses, cell phone numbers, contact information of all of the consumers I've done business with in the last 10 years. And then Potter Mortgage can then solicit them for their business, without really necessarily even talking to me per se. Like they'll do, I might be the catalyst because they hired me, but the point is if they could regenerate that book of business and then be able to market to that for maybe better service, better product, and better opportunities for those consumers.
Yeah,
it's going to be fascinating to see how the competitive and the legal landscape evolve as a result.
Yeah, because you're really talking about two different definitions of own. The legal definition within a system that was purchased by somebody, and that includes like non-public consumer information. And you're talking about owning the relationship with that person and the ability to reach out to them and be recognized. And that is a big difference. And so those are two different things. When they clash is when I've been using your system and now I'm leaving that company and I feel as though I have the second version of ownership, which is the right in the relationship to take it with me. And it really becomes, to your point, Rick, game on. Let's compete for that relationship because I own certain data that I paid for as a lender or whomever I is in that scenario. So I do think that's what causes lawsuits, but I also think it's what is changing.
Well, look, the courts have come down on the side of the companies
Yeah.
that the loan officer took the data from. Okay,
Correct.
that's a fact. But the fact that we can provide that same data,
Yeah, exactly.
because it's public facing data, right?
Yeah.
Provide that same data. You just as an individual loan officer have a hard time organizing that data. And even if they take their data, it's usually out of date. It's usually in a bad format. It's usually crappy data. You talk to, the CRMs, you talk to a total expert, what's it like when you add all the data in the new company that comes on when you onboard them? They say, it's terrible.
Oh yeah. I remember back in the old days, Jeff, remember, you'd export from your point database to like Goldmine or Act or something. And you'd carry those old databases to your next firm and you'd upload it into whatever CRM that was being used. I mean, what's interesting is you are diminishing those traditional boundaries, right?
Oh, yeah.
Inappropriately so, because to Jeremy's point, what is the definition of private data anyways? When in a world where everything
you're not talking about the application data, you're talking about who owns the house, who did the last deal. Most of that is public record thanks to the recording process.
And forget about the public record. Private data is now public.
I see what you're saying.
Like whatever goes on in your home, I probably could figure most of it out. From movies you watch to browser histories to what you shop for. Like how much money you spend every month in shopping and Starbucks, and like in a world where private data is public, what is PII anyways?
Yeah, well, this thing changed everything, right? You do everything on this phone, and you allow the companies to take all your contact you put in there, and the amount of data we see, the amount of data that some of these companies have. We don't even use and stuff, but I know of it. It's frightening, right? It's amazing how much data they have on people. Every one of us on the screen, they have unbelievable data on all of us, just like unbelievable data, right?
Yeah.
And they can market to you based on that, and they're only getting better, and they're only getting better at finding the data, right? It's stunning.
Well, but this gets to my competitive point where all of a sudden your local hardware store no longer has the advantage over you because they knew you, they know what you're going to buy, they know your shopping habits, you have a relationship with the owner of the local store. All of a sudden a store in Seattle, Washington, all of a sudden through Amazon or through better analytics can determine exactly what your preferences are, your needs in that local market. And this is kind of my point. I feel like it's planarizing, and this is the direction of goodness, by the way, but I also think it's dramatic, where it's planarizing the market, right? We're no longer do you have those advantages, and I do believe that the smaller organizations are just going to have a much more difficult time. In as much as I'd love the mortgage industry to be the way it used to be, where most mortgage companies were family-run companies with mom and dad running one part of the company and siblings and children, managing, processing, originating, sort of the small activities of the mortgage company. But I just feel like that there's just simply with the access to data, those micro advantages have now become disadvantages or no longer advantages. And as a result, they won't be able to compete.
But small companies can get the same data large companies can with the advent of our product.
I was going to say, I almost go the
counter. That's a good counter.
Yeah, I almost go the other way, Rick, where now the local hardware store can compete with Amazon better because it's the same data. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Jeff. I think 10 years ago, the amount of data we had when Jeremy and I worked at Rocket, and they grew so quickly, became the number one lender in the country. A lot of that was because we had data no one else had, right? Now that doesn't need to be the case. You can get that for small annual fee with Ingenious. I've actually seen some really, really tech literate, data literate small lenders that we've signed up recently.
Yeah, I love it. The catch is though, so I think of Ingenious as like an early warning system, as like an alert system for changing trends in whatever your market is, whether it's all 50 states or whether it's 2 counties. Because The difference, Brock, in that small savvy company is they now have 17 more competitors than they had yesterday.
No, there's no doubt about that. But they also
it's a noisier market, even for everybody. And so when I think of it as like, what are the changing trends in my market? What are the changing trends in my state? Have the digital lenders moved into purchase in my state somehow? With us at Rock, when we were at Quicken, Brock, it was like we knew the refi market as better than anybody, right? We bought
every lead. That was a public quote that was made.
I remember talking to a large regional bank who took a look at their portfolio recapture numbers and discovered that they were number 2 to Quicken's number 1 of their own customers. Quicken was poaching more customers than they were retaining when they looked at where their business went. And I think that's the big difference between refi and purchase. Is like you need a first alert system to see, are people in my area going a different direction for some reason? Has someone moved into my market and I didn't realize I was competing with them and I am now? I think of it that way.
I think it's like a U curve where it was like it got really impossible to be a small mortgage player and keep up with the tech. Now hopefully it's bouncing back a little bit. I mean, NewZip gives the experience of lots of things only Rocket could afford to build to what any size lender that wants it. Ingenious also does that. Like there's a dozen other companies that I think are really awesome in the space that are doing. That's kind of the way startups work, right? You couldn't afford a private car service, but you can afford to get an Uber now and then, right? So I think it's like a little bit of a bounce back where you can compete at any level, but you still have to plan and have the right tools and have the right people to compete. But I think Rocket's advantage a few years ago, or Quicken Loans advantage, 12 years ago, maybe more than it is today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it is fascinating. So where does the space go, Jeff? Like, as far as, do you see consolidation in your space with your competition? Do you see, or do you see that because of the rise of the need for data for lenders, that there's sort of plenty of the pie for everyone to go around? Where do you see this going, just competitively in your own space?
I mean, look, there's, I think it's competitive. I think there are different providers. I think that it all depends upon how all of them evolve, right? CoreLogic was the beginner. MMI came in, stole market share from them because they were more nimble and had a better interface and sold it for cheaper. We think that, clearly AI analyzing reports is the next step, along with having a purpose-built talent acquisition management and recruiting platform that is purposely built for mortgage, that our data sits in, is also a competitive advantage. And so it's going to be one of those deals, is who evolves the best. It's good old competition, right? And you're going to have a winner and you're going to have losers based on that. So when you say consolidation, I don't necessarily see any VC coming in and rolling up all of the data providers and dominating the market per se. I don't know if it's a big enough TAM for them per se. Could that happen? I suppose it could happen, but I think it's more going to be who can evolve and who can, compete and gain the market share. And that's where the future lies in the industry when it comes to providing the type of data that we do. It's going to be who can innovate, right? Who can innovate and who can make it easier for that lender to use the data.
What is, I was just going to say, like, what does innovation look like? How would you define innovation, across your competitors? Like theoretically, someone who wins the space dominantly is the one that does what?
It's the one that makes it easier for their customer to use and interpret the data and action off of those analytics. That's who wins.
Yeah,
and
it's the extreme level of optimization. Yeah.
You can all have data, but if you make it easier and more effective for them, that's who wins. Hands down. Hands down. You've got to make it so that it works for the customer.
Yeah, love that answer. Yeah, and you guys have done a really good job on those, and in especially those the recruiting and the and everything around. I love the agent LO relationship data. We use that everywhere, and it's like that's available in other tools. Maybe it's so easy for us to use in context with our partners and say, hey, I see that that you don't have any great real estate partners in this market. Or you do, but they have a bigger relationship with another lender. Like that type of in-context information has been amazing for our business. And I feel like it's not even in your guys' like top X number of use cases that you sell. So it's it'll be amazing to see the AI layer.
But it's there. It's there, and we're enterprise wide. You know, we can go from compliance to recruiting, you know, to realtor and broker relationships. We can go across all of those with equal advantage and accuracy that allows us to solve a lot of problems in a single organization. And as we make it easier to interact with, the more successful we'll be. That's the way it's going to go.
That's great. Well, anything else on your end, Jeremy?
Sounds great
for Mr. Walton.
Thank you, Jeff, for joining. It's always good to see you, and really appreciate that perspective. Right on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. We're excited about 2.0 and Central, and it's gonna be fun. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Look, I'm excited. I'm excited to see how you guys evolve and continue to sort of expand your market presence. You know, I was really, really impressed with the demo that I had back at the Mortgage Collaborative that when we met Jeff. Like because my market sort of strategy side was really driven when I saw that, saying to myself that, like, you know, it would competitively, it would give any lender a massive advantage in using that and really adopting that from the standpoint of, you know, data validation of new recruits and being able to know what markets to go after and who to go after and why, and structuring comp plans and so on. I think it's a great innovation. You've done it. And what was the company you acquired again for that? Somebody asked me that the other day. Was it or the technology you acquired and integrated that in?
Yeah, it's a system called Simple, and it was built by Fabian Agmi at AnnieMac, and he went from the last place division in his company in recruiting to first using this platform Simple, and his tagline on it, what he saw as results was, he really built it for not just recruiters, but for producing branch managers that say they don't have the time to recruit. And he comes down to it and he says, use it 30 minutes, 3 days a week, and you'll get 14 candidates a month that you can recruit. And, you know, it does the outreach, and every morning in comes your feed, and it tells you who it's talking to and who's the hot candidates and who you should be talking to. And so it gives you that path and keeps you on task, organizes it, uses tiles to move them through the system, and it really organizes it from a recruiting mortgage perspective, you know, not from, you know, some generic horizontal system that isn't built for mortgage, right? That you struggle with, right? It's purpose built, and there's I think there's a void there that we'll fill.
I love it. Well, I agree. I'm excited. I'm excited to get my hands on it myself. I'd love to continue to kick the tires on that, because that I was blown away by it. And that's an amazing statistic. Such a small amount of investment of time because of the technology can yield that many opportunities on a monthly basis. like every recruiter and every loan officer should be using this to either get new realtors or new loan officers for their team. I mean, it's so compelling.
It is.
Thanks.
It is compelling, and it makes it actionable analytics. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.